It was shortly after midnight when Sherlock Holmes suddenly rose from his chair at Baker Street and tossed aside the newspaper he had been reading. The fire crackled softly, while rain beat against the windows of London. "At last," Holmes said with unusual excitement, "something worthy of attention." I looked up from my medical journal. A new case? Holmes handed me a letter written in hurried handwriting. "Read the final sentence, Watson." I read aloud. "If you do not come before dawn, the Red Chamber will claim another victim." "Mysterious," I admitted. Holmes nodded. "And dangerous." Within half an hour, we were traveling through the dark streets toward Blackthorn Manor, an ancient estate standing alone outside the city. The owner, Sir Edwin Mallory, greeted us nervously at the entrance. He was pale, exhausted, and clearly terrified. "Thank heaven you came, Mr. Holmes," he whispered. "My family is cursed." Holmes removed his gloves calmly. "I do not investigate curses, Sir Edwin. I investigate facts." Sir Edwin led us into a grand hall lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. A massive grandfather clock echoed through the silence. "3 people have died in this house during the last month," Sir Edwin explained. "Each was found inside the Red Chamber." "How did they die?" I asked. "That is the strange part," Sir Edwin replied shakily. "No wounds, no poison. The doctors found nothing. Yet their faces..." He swallowed hard. "They died in absolute terror." Holmes' eyes sharpened instantly. "And tonight? Tonight, my brother Charles disappeared." Sir Edwin led us upstairs to the famous Red Chamber. The room was covered in dark crimson wallpaper faded by age. Heavy curtains blocked the moonlight. A single candle burned near the fireplace. Holmes walked slowly around the room, examining every detail. Suddenly, he stopped near the carpet. "Interesting." I stepped closer and saw muddy footprints leading toward the wall beside a bookshelf. Holmes tapped the wall lightly with his cane. A hollow sound echoed back. "A hidden passage," he murmured. Sir Edwin stared in disbelief. Holmes pressed against the wood paneling until a concealed door slowly opened inward. Cold air drifted out from the darkness beyond. We followed Holmes down a narrow stone corridor lit only by his lantern. The passage twisted beneath the manor until it opened into an underground chamber. In the center stood Charles Mallory, tied to a chair, unconscious but alive. Near him stood a tall man wearing a black coat and holding a lantern. The stranger turned in shock as Holmes stepped forward. "Good evening," Holmes said calmly. "Your performance is over." The man bolted toward another tunnel, but Holmes pursued him instantly. I rushed to free Charles while Sir Edwin shouted for servants. Moments later, we heard crashing sounds echoing through the tunnels, followed by Holmes' voice calling for assistance. We found him struggling with the stranger near an underground exit leading into the forest. Together, we subdued the man until the police arrived. Back inside the manor, Holmes explained everything. The prisoner was Victor Hale, a former servant dismissed years earlier by the Mallory family. Seeking revenge, he had discovered the hidden tunnels beneath the manor and used them to create the illusion of a curse. "But how did the victims die?" I asked. Holmes pointed toward a strange metal device found in Hale's coat. "Fear," he answered quietly, "combined with poison." Holmes explained that Hale released a rare toxic gas into the Red Chamber through hidden vents. The poison itself was weak, but it caused terrifying hallucinations and extreme panic. The victims, trapped inside the locked room, died from shock and heart failure. Sir Edwin sank into a chair in horror. "And Charles?" "Mr. Hale intended him to be the final victim," Holmes replied. "Fortunately, his letter arrived before dawn." Inspector Lestrade examined the hidden mechanism inside the walls. "Remarkable," he admitted, reluctantly. Holmes smiled faintly. Criminals often rely too heavily on superstition. They forget that even the darkest mystery eventually yields to reason. Later that evening, we returned to Baker Street. Rain still covered the streets of London, while Holmes sat beside the fire, playing softly upon his violin. "Tell me, Holmes," I said, "what first convinced you there was no curse?" Holmes lowered the violin and smiled slightly. "My dear Watson, evil spirits do not leave muddy footprints. I laughed quietly, while Holmes leaned back in his chair, his sharp eyes reflecting the firelight. The world, he said softly, is filled with men who hide behind fear, because they know fear blinds the mind. Fortunately, reason remains the greatest weapon against darkness.